Hello and welcome to Fire of Learning. I'm Justin. When we look at the names of the monarchs of European history, it's easy to notice how often names are repeated. The joke is that back in olden days there was a name famine, and so monarchs were left with just a couple of names to choose from. For example, meet Edward VIII of the United Kingdom, not counting the Anglo-Saxon Edwards either. Christian X of Denmark, Constantine XI of Byzantium, Alfonso XIII of Spain, Charles XVI of Sweden, and Louis XIX of France. From 1640 to 1918, every monarch of Prussia carried either the name Frederick, or William, or both. This habit was found elsewhere as well. There were 23 popes that took the name John, 6 Mehmeds of the Ottoman Empire, and, well, I believe you get the point. Another point, furthermore, is that as the same names are repeatedly chosen, naturally, this means that other names are not. It's interesting to note, therefore, that if we look at perhaps the most typical English name, John, we find only one king named John in English history. The question is, why? Well, let's get to it. Before we begin, I would like to thank Daniel Lee, Palace of Decay, Moses Brown, Veron Hussein, Huat Zin, Valentine Staber, W.D. Gass, and Omer Mirach Apaiden for being our most recent supporters on Patreon. They join these supporters who make these videos possible. So, if you're familiar with the legacy of King John of England, who is sometimes remembered as John the Bad, you might have suspected that I was dropping a hint in the intro as to what's going on here. The simple answer is that the names that are chosen because they're the traditional monarch names. They're the names of not only family, but often of past rulers whom the new rulers may wish to emulate. In other words, it'd be like a child being named after Grandpa, except in this circumstance, Grandpa was the great king that everyone loved and misses. So by taking the name Constantine, for example, in Byzantium or Eastern Rome, a ruler would be implying, "In rule I shall be like Constantine the Great," who was a very important figure in Byzantine history. He was canonized as a saint, considered a great ruler, and was the man who founded the Christian East with the city he built which was named after him, Constantinople. So it makes sense that many Eastern Roman emperors took his name. Even the last monarch of Greece, Constantine II, took this name. This was not merely symbolism, however. It was a method of subconsciously legitimizing their rule. Constantine was an imperial name. It was a name for a ruler to take. For a monarch to take a new name, therefore, was to possibly imply a new kind of ruler, which in certain circumstances might have worried people. Hence, there were no Byzantine emperors named Gary. Likewise, in France, you find a number of Louis that had a good memory attached to them. Clovis, for example, is an Anglicization of the name Chlodovig, which in French eventually gave rise to the name Louis. You also had Louis I, who wasn't the most effective ruler but was, importantly, for the purposes of legitimacy, the successor of Charlemagne. And you also had Louis IX, or Saint Louis, who was canonized as he was considered to have behaved like the ideal Christian monarch should. All this sort of reinforced the aura around the name Louis, which was also favored as simply a family name that was repeated. Ergo, there were 16 real kings named Louis, as well as a 17th, who was never crowned and died young, an 18th who briefly ruled, and a 19th, who ruled for about 20 minutes. And even today, the Bourbon pretender to the French throne styles himself as Louis XX, with his heir apparent being named Louis. Likewise, the opposite, of course, is found in history. When a new monarch comes to the throne taking an original name, and that monarch does poorly, you don't really see that name being repeated, such as with the aforementioned King John. This mentality even remains today. When Charles, the Prince of Wales, in other words, the heir apparent to Queen Elizabeth II, comes to the throne, he may avoid becoming Charles III and may rather become George VII. Why? Well, firstly, to honor his grandfather, George VI, and secondly, to avoid association with Charles I, who was beheaded, Charles II, who was a party animal, and Charles Edward Stuart, who was a Catholic Jacobite pretender to the throne. Really, this is a fairly common thing to do, even outside of monarchies. The names we like or dislike ourselves are sometimes influenced by great figures within a culture, or by people we've known in our personal lives that had that name. For a time, the name Oliver was avoided in Ireland because of its association with Oliver Cromwell, and in America, many people were not simply named George or Thomas, but indeed had the full name given to them, like George Washington Carver. And so there we have it. I hope you enjoyed this video. If so, I invite you to come check out the rest of Fire of Learning and to subscribe to see more videos like this in the future. A special thanks to our Patreon supporters once again listed here. To help with the cost of producing these videos, you can join them by clicking the link in the description. We're also on Twitter, Facebook, and I'm especially active on Instagram at firespaceofspacelearning. So come check us out there too. Thank you for watching.